Hi there. So I'm going to walk you through lesson 3.1 and highlight some elements that I would focus on if I were going to be using this lesson with my students. So lesson 3.1 is all about encouraging students to articulate their own values and their beliefs about their work, and focusing particularly on engagement and understanding why passion and care for work is particularly important in being able to carry out good work. So we're really focusing on the third E in good work, engagement. So some particular elements, first I'll give you an overview. So there are four components to this lesson. First is thinking about modeling your own thinking about passion and talking about someone that you admire, and giving your students an activity where they'd be interviewing interviewing someone that they believe is a model good worker, someone who they really think is passionate about their work. And then we move on to a dilemma discussion, focusing again on engagement in particular. Then we move on to uh, activity that is a debate between students, so enjoyment versus excellence, and which is most important. And your students are encouraged to have a debate about that. And then finally, there's an exit ticket where students can reflect on that activity. So that's an overview of the lesson. I'm going to dig a little deeper now into the different components. So first, we will talk about this opening activity. So it is the activity is you modeling for your students what you think is important in thinking of a particular individual who is a mentor of some kind. And so I encourage you to think about, um, to model this for them. So if I were to do this with my students, I would say, so I worked with a professor a number of years ago, and I really admired him in that he was really passionate about his work. And he was also incredibly humble at the same time. I might even bring in a visual. I have this postcard actually framed in my office from him. Um, it's just a nice postcard he gave me when I got married. It came to myself and my husband. But I really admired the fact that he always seemed to um, be deeply passionate about his work, but also be really humble and open himself up to his students. So those are qualities that I really admired. And then he also he had an impact on my life in that um, I try to emulate those qualities. Absolutely. So these are the things that I think are important, and I would encourage you to do a similar thing with your students. So this activity, you're kind of setting it up for them, but then you would be saying, okay, what the homework for this assignment, and they will have 2 weeks to do this. The homework for this assignment is to think of somebody that you'd like to interview, and you'll see over here that we have some interview questions. Where are they? I went right past them. So here are some questions that your students could use in interviewing someone. And so you're going to encourage them, you're going to set up this by modeling your own activity, and then you're going to walk them through the interview questions, and they'll have 2 weeks to do this. But the other thing that I would just highlight here is to think about some techniques around interviewing. So most likely your students probably haven't done a ton of interviewing. So I might offer some suggestions in terms of being comfortable, in terms of being prepared, have them review the questions ahead of time, and take it as a professional opportunity, and write a thank you note afterwards, those sorts of things. So that is just a bit of a setup for an activity and a homework assignment that we'll take later. The bulk of this session is spent in the dilemma discussion and in this activity. So if you were short on time, we like to always offer a suggestion about what you could cut out. And as much as I love the dilemma discussions, and I think that they're really important, this is the thing that I would probably cut out in this particular session. Only because there are lots of other dilemma discussions, and because I think that students at this point in the lesson plans haven't had as much opportunity to think about the importance of enjoyment versus doing your best work. How important is it to be passionate about your work, and how does that connect to your ability to do your best work. So if you had to cut one thing out, I would cut out the dilemma discussion. If you do have time for it, it's a really terrific conversation about the importance of doing well financially, which is, of course, very real for many of us, and to think about the fact that this particular individual is influenced to do to change his path because he believes that he might win some prize money, and how that impacts his interests going forward. So it's an important conversation. That said, if you had to choose, you could leave this one off. In thinking about this part of the activity, so there is an enjoyment and excellence activity. So you're going to present the students to the activity, divide them into small groups, and have them debate one of these two positions. So either you must enjoy your work to be able to do it well, or whether or not you enjoy your work has nothing to do with how well you do it. So you're setting them up for a debate, and then you're going to, here's this activity, you're going to give them the opportunity to argue it out. And some of your students may be more familiar with debate, some may be less familiar. I would say if they are not familiar with debate, setting some ground rules about polite disagreement, listening thoroughly before responding, those sorts of things, which may well already be norms in your class, understood. But if not, I think it's important to head those off at the pass. And then finally, there's an exit ticket, which is all around thinking about this activity and reflecting about it. As you all know at this point, reflection is a key component to the good project lesson plans. So we like to encourage that as often as possible. So the exit ticket is at the end of these activities. And I would also just say to remind them of the interviewing activity as well. That's something that could be added to the good work portfolio. And finally, as is always the case, there are multiple ways that writing up the interview could happen. It's not here, but it is in the lesson plan. So you could actually, it's right here, multiple ways to report back about the interview. They could write a one-page blog about what they learned. They could create a slide deck about what they learned. They could create a really short film about what they learned, or some sort of graphic representation about what they learned during that interview. So as always, we want to offer multiple ways for students to interact and to respond about their activities. So there's your overview of lesson 3.1. Hope it was helpful, and we look forward to learning from you and your students.